So we'll start with the prayers, and then after we do the prayers, we'll jump into some presentation and time for Q&A. Then we'll have a tea break and do some meditation. And then we'll have lunch, another presentation, time for Q&A, another meditation, a bit like that. So hopefully it all works out well for you folks. And we'll start with the prayers. So just take a minute and get yourself grounded and centered, connecting with your physical posture, your physical space. And then if you feel comfortable reciting these prayers aloud, to the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not, the incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, in illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits, may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. And then refuge in Bodhichitta. Sangye churam sogi chunam lai jancho padu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyan gi pe sonam gi rola benji sangye drupa sho Sangye churam sogi chunam lai Janchu padu dane kapsuchi, daki chunyan gi pe sonam gi, rola penje sange drupasho, sange chudon sogi chunamha, janchu padu dane kapsuchi, daki chunyan gi pe sonam gi, rola penje sange drupasho. And just letting that motivation sink in and connect. Okay. So when we look at Buddha nature, what we're really looking at is our potential. And when we're looking at bodhicitta, what we're really looking at is what to do with that potential. Does that make sense? So it's like we're looking at these two sides of, you could understand your potential and not do anything with it. You could just know that you have it and be like, ho hum, I'll just live my life. Yeah. Or you could be aspiring to things, but not really know how far you could go with it. And so I think it's nice to look at these two things side by side. And it becomes a question of, do we really believe that change is possible? Do we really believe that the mind can be transformed? And when we were, children and when we were young adults, I think that we understood that we were developing, and we framed things in terms of developing and growing, but we didn't frame things so much in terms of changing, which is what was actually happening. It felt like, and we were taught to believe that we were growing into ourselves, as if there was kind of a self to grow into. Yeah. When in fact, we were changing and transforming and making a lot of decisions about who we will be. Yeah. It's not like we found ourselves, we built ourselves. And then it felt natural and we believed in it. And the years go by. And now it's like, this is just who I am. Instead of, this is just who I am so far. This is just who I am, having developed many things together. And it's very easy for us to get kind of concrete about this sense of self from a very worldly perspective of identity, let alone the deeper Dharma perspective of the absence of an inherently existent self. So this conversation really starts with, I believe that change is possible in myself. I've seen that change is possible in myself. But then when I come close to New Year's each year and I set my New Year's resolutions and I want to change something, I've got a good solid couple of days in me and then I revert back. Yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And we do. And then we don't. Yeah, and it's only natural. It's very human. And we kind of set ourselves up for failure in a way because we don't understand the way to train the mind. And I think we also don't understand that our negative habits and our negative beliefs and the ways we hurt ourselves and others are removable. They are not us, but they make perfect sense why they're here. And they make perfect sense why we function with them or dysfunction with them. They're all coming from a baseline ignorance about the state of reality, including the reality of the self. So if you can sit with, I came by all my negative habits, honestly. I came by them honest. Do you say that in Santa Fe? Yeah, we say it in Montana. We came by it honest, meaning our history makes us make sense to ourselves. Yeah, that if someone else had had our same life and our same conditioning and our same genetics, they would have wound up the same way. Yeah, so both our good traits and our bad traits, that which is useful, that which isn't, it's all a coming together of things. And so you can say, this is me, but land gently on that. Say, this is me, this coming together of countless causes and conditions and experiences. I'm going to slap a name there and call it Yonten or call it your own name, but there's no core that called those things to it. Yeah, there wasn't like a little magnet self that said, I will now gather this education and gather these relationships and gather that information. There was no little magnet drawing things to you. Yeah, things just came together And in a way, you know, the karma is in a way like that magnet, but it's not like a self magnet that's like looking for its authentic self and like finding proof of that, weaving it in like a tapestry that was already organized. That's not how life is. So just sit with, what have you changed as an adult? Yeah, having become an adult, what are some of the habits that you consciously were able to change? Even if it's something as simple as, you know, you stop smoking, you know, which is not simple, which is really hard actually. But, you know, if you stop smoking, or if you cut back on sugar, for example, if you started swearing less, you know, simple things, small things. You know, maybe it's as simple as now you take your shoes off when you come in the house because it's more sanitary and you're a groovy Buddhist now and that's what we do, no shoes. I don't know, tiny thing. But it gives you this kind of inner confidence that change is possible. I just have to pace it right. And it also has to be worth my while. There has to be a temporary benefit and a long-term benefit. I need to be able to see the benefits because right now we are baby practitioners and it's hard for us to do things for a giant long-term goal if we don't also see small short-term benefit. Yeah, so eventually we want to be able to work for enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings without needing proof of success constantly. But at our level, it helps to notice that the mind is getting better and kinder and happier. So how do you pace your practice in such a way that you're reinforcing the fact that the Dharma works? So these are also just sort of questions to play with before we dig into the material. But when you hear the word Buddha nature, what does it convey to you? What's the connotation of that? Just from what you've heard around, what you've studied so far, when you hear Buddha nature, what does it sound like to you? Just that. Does it have any sense to you? Does it have any emotion with it? Yeah, Susie.
It's just, it's everything. It's perfection. It's a relief. It's actually a relief because I realized that all the layers of crap are on top.
Yeah.
So it's like when you said that in a class a while ago, it was like a wow moment. It's like, we all have that. How do I get there? In baby steps that are manageable.
Yeah. Relief is a
Because
good one.
it's yeah, and magical, like a magical relief, like but also exciting, and the fact that there is a path to that, again, a relief.
Yep.
I don't have to make my own map.
Yeah, thank goodness, right? No need to reinvent the wheel. Does it help you with difficult people in your life to think they have Buddha nature, even if they're a jerk? Their being a jerk does not negate the fact that they have Buddha nature.
Is that for me or is that for everyone?
Yeah, you or anyone, yeah.
Yeah, it really does, because it helps me be compassionate and see underneath the layers of stuff.
Yeah, it can change how we identify others, just like how we identify ourselves. And something that I say to myself constantly is that my Buddha nature has been with me from beginningless time. My afflictions, this particular set, this particular personality, is relatively new. Yeah, it's, you know, pushing 40, right? But it's not actually so solid as it feels. You know, even the cells in your body are replacing themselves all the time. And every 7 years you have a whole new body, you know, these kind of things. It feels so solid, our personality and our identity. And all of these things can feel like a heaviness, or can feel like a safety. They can feel like a cozy cocoon, or they can feel like a prison. But that's kind of new. We've had various kinds of afflictions from beginningless time. We've had various kinds of personalities, and we trend a certain way. But this one here, this is a pretty new person. Buddha nature's been with me the whole time. So actually, it makes more sense to place my identity, if I must place an identity anywhere, on my Buddha nature. Yeah, that makes more sense. Logically, it makes more sense. Not just happy, not just nice, but actually that potentiality, that raw potentiality has been there from beginningless time. And then you can think of all of your, neuroses and your, I don't know, your trauma history and your quirks and the things that you're disappointed in yourself because of, and all of that stuff is kind of incidental then. It's not you. It's just what happened here. Yeah. And the things that are problematic and might hurt other people, that might be hard for other people to live with in you, you can just take a gentle responsibility for and think, I need to work on those things so that this mental continuum can come into its fullest potentiality, a complete Buddha. But I'm not bad, and I'm not wrong, and I'm not faulty. There's nothing wrong with me. I just accumulated habits. Don't identify with them. Yeah. And this is the really deep thing to sit with. If you identify with your afflictions because you think that's the way to take responsibility for them, it's hard to snip them out. It's hard to purify them. It's hard to change them, because even if you hate them, they feel like you. Yeah. If you hate parts of yourself, but you still think of them as self, there's this little bit of like tension with, well, I can't change it because it's me, or I'll lose something of myself if it's gone. Have you ever met an angsty teenager who really identifies with their depression? And they feel like their depression makes them a deeper, soulful person that understands the darkness of existence. Yes, can you picture this kind of archetypal angsty teenager full of ennui and melancholy, and maybe they're having a bit of a goth moment, and what they're saying and what they're observing about life is not completely untrue. They're making some accurate observations. People can be selfish. The climate is in trouble. Like, there are valid things to observe there. But the conclusion they're coming to is apathy, despair. So even if their observations are accurate, their conclusions are not. But to talk to someone who's in that state and say, you can observe all of those same disastrous things or problematic things and come to a completely different conclusion about them, it feels like it costs them their identity. They can't get happy, because then who are they if they're happy? That's like destroying their whole worldview of who they are. So it's not like they want to be sad, but to become happy somehow is too much of a challenge to their identity. Yeah, have you ever met kids like this in your life, or been that kid? I was certainly that kid myself. Oh, it's grumpy. I tell you what, so grumpy. And, and sort of like self-righteously grumpy, stompy grumpy. And it really took a lot of unpacking to realize that observations and the conclusions I come to are two separate things. Just like when you're sitting with someone who's suffering, you almost feel like, should I be suffering too? Because I'm with them and they're suffering? Like, is that the way to be a good friend, to also be sad? No. But it almost feels like that's what our empathy is telling us should be. And that's why we get exhausted watching the news, or being with a struggling friend, or, bearing witness to suffering of any type. We start to get really fatigued, understandably, because we're identifying with it and going into it with them. And now it's two people drowning in the bog instead of just one. So part of this conversation about Buddha nature is recognizing that people besides you also have Buddha nature. They are not their suffering, they are not their afflictions, but they have suffering and afflictions. So you can bear witness to those suffering and afflictions, and it doesn't sort of pull you into this sadness or resentment or tiredness, because you're also thinking about their potential. And you're thinking, just like me, their potential has been with them from beginningless time. That is more them than this current moment of pain. So if I can hold in my mind the fact of their Buddha nature, I can also hold whatever disaster is happening in front of me, and I don't feel so panicked. What should I do? What should I do? How do I fix it? That can just kind of chill. Yeah, you can relax and just hold the space and remember that these things are temporary and they roll through. Buddha nature is not temporary. Yeah, it's there all the way until it's actualized. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you feel like this person's suffering is all there is, it's exhausting to sit next to or with or support. But if you think this is temporary, this is not them, they have Buddha nature, and even if the worst case scenario of their life happens, it's still not the end of the story for them. It's not the end of the story for them. Even if the worst thing happens, even if your best friend commits suicide, it's still not the end of the story for them. Yeah, their mind continues, their potential to develop it doesn't end, even the worst things. And so if you're holding that, it decreases your anxiety around holding the space for people who are struggling, doesn't it? So thinking about Buddha nature helps you with your own stuff. It helps you support other people with their stuff. But it also gives you this kind of aspirational goal that can give life meaning day by day. So things aren't just running by and the years roll by and, days blur into one another. You can start to really organize your life in such a way that it's moving you this direction. And you try to hold the awareness that you have no idea how long this will take. Yeah, it could take one lifetime, it could take 20 lifetimes, it could take 20 eons. Who cares really? You have a goal, you have an aspiration, you have a point of focus. And when you have a big picture in your mind, whatever it is, even if it's just a plan to go on holiday, any kind of big picture in your mind makes the everyday stresses less stressful, makes the everyday conflicts less problematic. Everything kind of goes into its correct proportion when you have a big picture like, my work is to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. So then this person doesn't like me, oh well, right? It's karma, it's my behavior, it's them, it's their suffering, it's many things, but there's a lot more going on in my life than just right in front of me. Yeah. There's a timer going off on my phone, one moment. Dindrip had to remind me that we're on mountain time because I'm in Pacific time and I'm used to mountain time. So that was my go online and set up the Zoom with Venerable Dindrip. But here we are. Classic. So, okay, so this is the kind of stuff that we're going to be looking at this weekend is how does looking at the big picture and our own potential make this moment easier? But more than just this moment easier, how does it help us organize our life and our mind so we have more vitality and energy and momentum to go towards this goal? And when we're doing something like meditation for just today, it can actually make you a bit stagnant. Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm a bit stressed, I'll do some meditation to relax. And then you meditate and you're either more relaxed or you're not. And then you go on with your day. And it's kind of like, is it worth it? Yeah, just like if you're exercising just for today, is it really worth it? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're thinking about, I'm creating a habit that's going to build power over time and lead to a goal that I value, then it is worth your time. And it might work in that moment and it might not, but you still have the joy of, this is for a process I believe in. Is it making sense? Yeah. So I'm just curious, and there's a few of you with your videos off, which I understand if you're in your pajamas and you're lurking, but I would love it if you had your videos on. It's totally fine. Can you give me kind of a sense of where you're at with this topic. Is it totally new, know a little bit about it, or you've actually studied quite a bit about Buddha nature? Do you kind of feel, give me a little wave if this is a new topic in your Buddhist study, Buddha nature. Little wave, totally new? No? Had some teachings about it, but not tons and tons? A little bit of that, yeah. And then who's like done, you know, Sublime Continuum, Tathagata Garbha, Maitreya's Ornament of Clear Realization, like blah, blah, that. Are there any like Buddha nature scholars? No emojis popping up, okay. So I'll aim it for intermediate students, shall I? Intermediate. But if you're having old questions from years ago that feel basic, please feel free to ask basic questions, even if you feel embarrassed and like you should already know better, because it takes a while. And, you know, it takes a while for us to be able to formulate our questions. So even if you've been studying for many years, you might come up with a seemingly very basic question at last. So please don't feel shy to ask those kind of questions. Okay, so we're going to dig into it. I'm going to do a very brief PowerPoint. I shall not subject you to too much PowerPoint, but here we go. So I want to just kind of introduce or reintroduce these three categories of looking at the Buddhist teachings. So we have the basis, we have the path, and we have the result. And it's one way of categorizing all of the Buddhist teachings so we kind of understand why we're talking about it. Yeah, it's always a really important question to ask ourselves. Why are we talking about this? Are we talking about it from a scientific perspective and just kind of an understanding of reality? Are we talking about it from the perspective of what to do? Or are we talking about it from the perspective of what will happen? So this is a way of categorizing things that's particularly useful in this conversation. So in the basis is the conversation of the two truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth. The two truths are ways of relating to phenomena as conventional or all-obscuring truth, the truth to a worldly mind, and ultimate truth, the truth to a mind engaged in ultimate analysis. So the basis is about talking of our two ways of understanding or relating to reality. And sometimes this category is called Buddhist science. So when you hear His Holiness talking to neuroscientists and quantum physicists and psychologists and various kinds of science, he's really talking from the perspective of the basis, because he's talking about ways to understand reality, but not necessarily what to do with that information. And things within these categories are usually things you can prove logically. And, you know, it might take a while to practice and then touch experientially, but that's not the conversation. The conversation is kind of how things exist. So for whom is the question? Yes. So for an ordinary person like us, right, an ordinary person, we just kind of live from the perspective of relative truth, sometimes called conventional truth. So we're living through what's called a concealer consciousness or an all-obscuring consciousness, which means that we do not see the whole story ever. We don't see the whole story of ourselves. We don't see the whole story of other people, situations, the environment. Why? Because we're obscured by ignorance. So it's like we've got a filter of ignorance that's making us wrongly perceive things. And or illusion, it kind of gives us the sense of an illusion. And the illusion is things appear to truly exist from their own side, in and of themselves. That's how they seem, even though that's the opposite of how they actually exist. So relative truth is wrong, basically. It's the wrong way of seeing truth, and it's the only way we know. Yeah. So there's, you know, there's mistaken and wrong forms within that subdivision. Like, for example, they always give the example of if you have jaundice and you see everything kind of yellowy, or if your eyes are a bit blurry and you look up at the moon and it looks like there are two moons, you know, if you're sort of believing that the reflection in the mirror is a whole other face. They give lots of different examples of there's wrong and then there's wrong, right? So what we're talking about is the everyday mistakenness, which still might have accuracy in terms of convention, but is actually not totally the whole story. So things appear to inherently exist, they lack inherent existence. And the word appear is kind of a tricky word because it's not like visually appear. It is visually appear, but it's not only visually. It's like the seeming. Things have this like seeming of self-existence. It seems like everything is just as it seems. Do you know what I mean? So when we're looking at relative truth, then it invites us to do practices to work within that kind of echo chamber, for lack of a better word. Yeah, we're shouting and it bounces back at us and we think it's someone else's voice, but it was really us just yelling. We're trying to not be so loud. Yeah, and then nicer words come back to us because we haven't thrown them out there. Something like this, yes. We're working on things like loving kindness and compassion and all the good stuff, while knowing that that whole process doesn't have complete clarity. Yeah, but is still vitally important because for us to see through all of the ignorance is going to take a long time. Yeah, so we need to understand relative truth while understanding it is concealing truth. So when we say relative truth and ultimate truth, it's not like it's two truths to find. It's more like it's two ways of looking at the same object. One is under the influence of ignorance, one is not under the influence of ignorance. So ultimate truth is what then? Yeah, everything is lacking inherent existence. Yeah, it's the emptiness of inherent existence from the Prasangika view. So that's hard to live your life with, isn't it? You're walking around thinking, oh, everything's empty of inherent existence. I need a sandwich. Do I need a sandwich? I don't know, a cup of tea. Like, it's hard to function if you're only thinking about ultimate truth, but you haven't realized it yet. It becomes absurd. And we've never really known ultimate truth. And so what to do? It can make you paralyzed. It can make you weird. So what you're trying to do is just invite it in gradually and using the very easy, very accessible method of dependent arising, which is basically things exist out of context, right? Because of context, things exist, not by themselves. That's a very rough, easy introductory understanding of emptiness, is things are empty because they depend. Nothing exists by itself because it needs context. Yeah. And I think this is a familiar concept to some of you and might be newer to others of you, right? But understanding that when we're talking about the true truths, it's just a discussion of reality. We're not saying, here's what you do with that information yet. So that's why we can talk about quantum physics and particles and the way neuroscience works and how we project our reality. And it's all just an interesting conversation of science, Buddhist science, Western science. It's a science conversation. And in a way, it doesn't really beg the question what to do with that information. It's really up to you what you do with that information. But we would say that's the non-religious side of Buddhism. That's the philosophy side of religion, or the science side. Yeah, that's the science side. When people say, oh, Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy, it's because they only understand about the basis. Yeah, or they have a different definition of religion that implies a creator God, and we don't have this creator God idea in Buddhism, so they assume that because we don't have that, we're not religious. Depends on your definition of religion, right? But the basis, I think, is something that if you can start to explore it with a curious mind that's not pushing, that's just really interested, then it makes it easier to engage with the path and get to the result. If you're feeling like by understanding it, I need to already be practicing it, that's too much pressure, because we understand tons of things that we aren't able to practice right away. Lots and lots of things. Yeah, we understand about what we should be eating, Do we always eat the right thing? No. But we understand what we should be eating. Yeah. We understand how we should communicate, right? We understand kind ways of communication, maybe nonviolent communication. We understand about, speaking from your own perspective and being an active listener and creating safe space and all the things. We understand, but we don't always do it. So this is the same thing here in Buddhism, where you're working on your understanding of reality. Don't be so hard on yourself and think because you get it, you should be able to work with it immediately. Give it time to digest and process. Yeah. Okay, so the basis. Are there questions about the basis before we look at the path? It's only just kind of a rough surface conversation, but it's an important context. Yeah, good. Okay. So then we have the path, and these are the two wings, method and wisdom, the two wings to take us to enlightenment. So they're also called the two collections, accumulations or types of merit. They are the merit of virtue, which develops the method side of the path by practicing generosity and so forth, and the merit of transcendental wisdom, which develops the wisdom side of the path by meditation on emptiness and so forth. So here's what you do with the two ways of looking at reality. Yeah. So with the conventional truth, you practice the method side of the path. With the ultimate truth, you practice the wisdom side of the path. And you need to be practicing in both these ways. Even though relative truth is not true, we still need to operate within that illusory system because it's all that we understand. And then also have the project of working on understanding reality truly and accurately. Both, yes. And I think in terms of daily life practice, it's much more accessible to think, if I work on method, that is a good, meaningful life. And if I work on method while remembering wisdom, it's going to be even healthier and it's going to be more enriching. And then gradually, I'm going to work on wisdom on its own. So thinking of an example, say something really easy like generosity. How do you practice something like generosity while remembering wisdom? Yeah, how would you do that? Yeah, so you're not necessarily thinking about the emptiness of inherent existence on its own. You're using it in the context of generosity. How is generosity empty of inherent existence? Because it dependently arises. How would you sit with that? Just so you're kind of like not being a fundamentalist about your generosity. And so this way of accessing wisdom or accessing ultimate truth is via looking at dependent arising. And this is what I meant by context, right? So you would say generosity is good, not from its own side. Yeah, because is it always good in all contexts? Sometimes it could be enabling, sometimes it could be ego-driven, sometimes it could be this, sometimes it could be that. It's not good in and of itself, it's good contextually, right? And if you're remembering it's good contextually, you offer some food to someone and they throw it back at you, you're not as mad because you weren't buying into the story that it's always inherently good and useful. But if you're really thinking, I am a good person doing a good thing for you, poor person who needs this here. And then they're like, no, then you're mad at them. Yeah. So forgetting context makes you more problematic. It makes your mind more small and it makes you more reactive. If you're thinking everything exists within a grand context, you relax. Yeah. And there are many levels of dependent arising you could look at. You could think about causes and conditions. You could think about parts and context. You could also think the very subtlest one, merely labeled by the mind. Yeah. This is generosity merely labeled by the mind. Right. Yeah. Not from its own side generosity. Not from its own side good. And then you still do it. Right? Don't let yourself go too far and think, oh, well, then it doesn't matter, because then that's verging into nihilism. Yeah. So relative truth and ultimate truth, the understanding of each of them can reinforce your path. It can reinforce method and wisdom. And if you're just kind of letting your mind be flexible and move between the two, then you're going to have forward momentum on the path. But if you get stuck in only trying to think about the wisdom side, your heart might get a little bit hard, or you might get a bit disconnected from the suffering of sentient beings because you think, oh, suffering is empty of inherent existence. And it is, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all. Yeah. And then you come back to, therefore, compassion. But what I think is compassion might not be what they think is compassion. So you're being compassionate without tightness, without fundamentalism. Yeah. So these two wings of practice are really key to bring in. And when I say practice, I don't mean meditation only. Yeah, when I say practice, I mean the wisdom of hearing and reflection, the wisdom of reflection, the wisdom of analysis, and the wisdom of meditation, plus what you're doing in your regular life. Your regular life is your practice if you make it so. Yeah, you're in a house with people, you're making a cup of tea, ask other person in the house, would you like a cup of tea? That can be practice, or it can be just politeness, or it could be obligation. It can be a number of things. You're deciding what it is. Yeah, and their response to it doesn't have to dictate what it is to you in your practice. So here's your cup of tea, not out of obligation. Here's your cup of tea. May you be well and happy. And then you don't like my tea and I put too much milk in it. Oh, well, I'll do better next time, but that wasn't even the point. Yeah, the point was developing my mind to work for the welfare of all sentient beings. The details can be adjusted without guilt or shame. Yes. Yeah. So the methods, the path side is key. This is our work, and that leads to the result. And the results are the two bodies of a Buddha, the Rupakaya and the Dharmakaya. So the truth body, or Dharmakaya, is the result of the wisdom side of the path. And the form body, or Rupakaya, is the result of the method side of the path. We need both of these, quote, bodies to work for the welfare of all sentient beings. We need this truth body, this Dharmakaya, for our own sake, so that our own suffering is gone, so our own ignorance is gone. We need the Rupakaya, the form body, the result of the method side of the path, in order to enact the welfare of all sentient beings, in order to benefit them and to have qualities like perfected compassion and perfected love and omniscience and all of these things to benefit other people. So this is the result. So do you kind of roughly have your head around it, right? The basis is the two truths, the path, method and wisdom, the result, the two bodies. Yeah, and the two bodies conversation is the Buddha nature conversation. Yeah, the path conversation is our Bodhichitta conversation, and we'll do a bit more of that tomorrow. Today's going to be more Buddha nature, and tomorrow's going to be more Bodhichitta. So we're going to start with the result because that's fun and interesting. Start with the result because then it'll make you want to do the path. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to hit you with a little bit of detail about these bodies, but if you're boggled or confused, please ask, okay? So we get more detail because Buddhists love lists, as you may have found, okay? But this is a really important thing to look at. So start at the top, the gray sections, okay? Impermanent and permanent. So the mind, our mind, has aspects that are impermanent, meaning they change moment to moment, and aspects that are permanent, do not change moment to moment. So this is already a fact. It's not something we have to develop. It's just reality. Our mind has a changing aspect and an unchanging aspect. The changing aspect is called the developmental lineage. Yeah, lineage meaning, like our birthright, what we can grow into. And the naturally abiding lineage there in the turquoise means that which is already present. So just stay with that top tier. Yeah, developmental lineage, naturally abiding lineage, related to impermanent and permanent. And this is where the biggest source of confusion about Buddha nature comes in for people. People sometimes say, you're already a Buddha, you just need to wake up to it. Have you heard this? Yeah, you're already a Buddha, you just need to wake up to it, or you just need to purify. Yes. And then some people say, you're not a Buddha yet, you need to grow into it. It's a developmental process. Yeah, it's a process of development. So which is true? Both are true. Yes. But in terms of you're already a Buddha, you just need to wake up to it, that's a little bit overly simplified. What it's referring to is this naturally abiding lineage. So there's one part of your mind which is unchanging, and that is your mind's lack of inherent existence. Your mind's lack of inherent existence is not changing moment to moment. Yeah, it's a mere absence. It's a non-affirming negation, and it's really good news because if the mind did have inherent existence, it could never change. Yeah, if your mind was just as it is, where would you go with it? So your naturally abiding lineage, there's a lot of analogies for it, but it's described sometimes as like the lump of gold underneath the pile of garbage. And the pile of garbage is all of your ignorance and symptoms of ignorance and behaviors of ignorance and afflictions and negative karma just piled on top, which is all removable, removable, removable. There's your lump of gold that you've had the whole time. That's your naturally abiding lineage. But it's still just a lump of gold. It needs to be formed and shaped into a Buddha statue. So you have that raw potentiality always. You can never destroy it, no matter how crazy you get, no matter how angry, no matter how many mistakes. You have this essential purity potential, but it's not finished product yet. So you need to clean it off and clean it off with purification, with all sorts of practices. And then when you get to it, you're forming it into something that is functional and useful to benefit sentient beings. That makes sense. So the naturally abiding lineage is like the lump of gold. The developmental lineage is like shaping it into a Buddha statue. Yeah. So it's the same raw material. You don't have to go and find new raw material to make yourself a Buddha. All the things for Buddhahood you already have. You have everything you need. It's just not all come together yet and not all been organized yet. Yeah, so this is, why we're really sitting with, you are a perfect potential. You are a perfect potential. There is no original sin. There's just primordial ignorance, which is a very different vibe. Yeah, it's not you are bad and should be punished or cleansed or repent or anything like that. It's that you're confused. And we are. We don't need to say, no, I'm not. Yes, we are. We're a little bit fuddled. We get all kind of worked up about stuff that doesn't matter. We see that every day. Yeah. And gradually, we start to see that it's more than just being a little bit fuddled about stuff. It's a deep primordial ignorance, which misunderstands reality. But it's a misunderstanding. It's an ignorance and a superimposition that all can be clarified with the very same mind that is obscured now. Your confused mind can be educated. Yeah, just like your brain can be educated, your mind can be educated. So it's fantastic news, yes? But when you look at those two factors of the mind, it can be sort of confusing and sound contradictory. How can something be both impermanent and permanent? How can something be both perfect and obscured? How can those things exist simultaneously? And it's okay to have those doubts. We should have those doubts and confusions. Just kind of like, what does that even mean? But remember, it's not like the mind is one like glunk physical entity. If we were talking about the brain, this conversation would be even weirder. We're not talking about the brain, we're talking about the mind. And the mind is not material. So then having a discussion about it, having aspects that are changing and an aspect that is unchanging is a less strange conversation because we're not talking about this meat. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts so far, just kind of impressions or questions or ideas? Or parts where I lost you? Yeah, go ahead, Barbara. Yeah.
I guess as you were talking, what came to my mind is kind of an analogy that makes sense, is a diamond in the rough. Our
Yep.
diamond, although that's concrete, and I know the mind isn't, but it's always, it's there. And then the rough is all of our delusions and everything that we need to clear away to get to that essence.
Yep. Absolutely.
Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's beautiful. Yep. And that works with, the folk stories of our youth. We don't have to go into a whole, other kind of cultural perspective. If we already have some reference from our childhood, I think it really helps. And I think that the biggest danger in talking about something that is permanent is feeling like it's a core self, or like a unchanging soul or something, or Atman, if we're thinking about some other Eastern traditions. The danger in talking about an unchanging portion is then your identity can get all excited and say, oh, there is a core self. And you're like, what? The thing that doesn't change is an absence. Yes, the thing that doesn't change is a lack of a quality. Yeah, the quality that's lacking is inherence. And that lacking inherence doesn't come and go. It's always there. Yeah. So you can't be like, oh, I found myself, I found my identity, and then it's an absence. And you go, oh, wait, that's different than a soul. That's different than Atman. That's different. Yeah. So keep remembering that in Buddhism, there is a self, but it is so subtle, it's almost like it's not there. The self that exists is only that which is merely labeled by the mind on the collection of parts. The self is labeled on the body and mind, but you cannot find it on the body and mind, or in the body and mind. Yeah. So just, kind of like in the back of your mind, hear that despite the fact that there's this permanent aspect, is not saying that there is some sort of permanent selfness that's an unchanging selfness. Yeah. Every single thing you identify as you is there relatively, don't worry, but is not there ultimately. Yeah. It's sometimes useful for me to think about self in terms of something that is a little bit more tangible, like if you had all of the numbers from 1 to 100 written out in front of you in rows. Okay, so imagine you have all the numbers from 1 to 100 written out in rows, and then you colored all of the prime numbers blue. Yeah, and you just chose to color all the prime numbers blue. Suddenly a shape would kind of appear, wouldn't it? Yeah, and you'd be like, oh yeah, with the 3 and the, and there'd be a shape. And you could start to believe that the shape was always there from its own side. But no, you just chose to color the prime numbers blue. You could have just as easily decided to color in the even numbers, or the odd numbers, or the ones with zeros, and all sorts of different shapes would appear. Yeah, so it's like the self is kind of like you're labeled there on these parts, but it feels like the parts made the label, and that's not the direction it went. Yeah, like the part said, I am self, or the table said, I'm a table. Yeah, like the legs and the top and the wood said, I'm a table. No, we said, you're a table on those parts. Yeah, when it feels directionally opposite. It feels like that's a bad person coming from their side. They are a bad person. No, we said they're a bad person based on a set of pieces that we colored blue. Yes. And there's all these other pieces too. And someone else sees a whole different set of pieces and it feels equally true, their labels about them. Yeah. Yeah, so don't kind of forget what you know about reality when we're talking about something being permanent, because it just means that aspect doesn't change. That aspect will be one part of the Dharmakaya once you're enlightened. Yeah. Yeah, so slowly, and it's hard to get your head around these words, and these are Sanskrit words and they're new concepts. but once you get used to them, it's an easier conversation. So if you look down, truth body in blue, kind of in the babyish blue, truth body in parenthesis, Dharmakaya. So this truth body is for your own welfare, for your own benefit, and it is your ignorance is completely overcome, your suffering is completely overcome, and one aspect of that is from the naturally abiding lineage, and it becomes the nature truth body once you're fully enlightened Buddha. And this is called the Swabhavikakaya. The other piece, the wisdom truth body, or the Jnana Dharmakaya, is the result of having realized emptiness perceptually. Yeah, not just intellectually, but with deep perception. You've achieved the path of seeing, you've gone on to the path of meditation, into the path of no more learning. Your wisdom realizing emptiness is fully developed, and all of the obscurations, both cognitive and afflictive, have been completely destroyed. So this truth body has like two subdivisions, one from what was there naturally, one which would had to be developed. Yeah. And then we go over to the developmental lineage, and there's these two green sections of the Rupakayas, or the form bodies. We've got the emanation body and the enjoyment body, the Nirmanakaya and the Sambhogakaya. And the emanation body of a Buddha is something that is directly benefiting sentient beings, whether they realize it or not. The Sambhogakaya is more related to advanced practitioners. So an emanation body could be the body of a Buddha, but it also could be a bridge or a dog or a book. Yeah, the Buddhas can emanate in a million different ways according to our karma. And because the Buddha is omniscient, they can know, for you, you need a gust of wind to turn your head that way, to look at this thing, which will remind you of that, which will make you nicer that day. Because I know your whole mental continuum. Yeah. For you, you need a literal Dharma teaching, step by step by step, to work your way through these processes and heal yourself. For you this, for you that, for you this, for you that. The Nirmanakaya can manifest in a million different ways. Yeah, so it can be that, you know, your pet cat could be a cat, or your pet cat could be a Buddha manifesting as a cat. Yeah, so that you will do regular acts of generosity, regular acts of patience, yes, regular acts of, you know, having joy because they're so absurd. So, you know, your cute little cat in your house is either a cat or it's a Buddha pretending to be a cat. Yes, or manifesting as a cat for your benefit. And we can't tell. We can't tell. During Buddha Shakyamuni's lifetime, his cousin Devadatta hated him and thought he was terrible. He was the Buddha. He loved everyone. He had perfect qualities. Devadatta thought he was terrible and wanted to kill him. What? Because Devadatta didn't have the karma to see a fully enlightened Buddha. So he just saw his annoying cousin. Yeah. And it's interesting to sit with this because we cannot take another person's measure. We really cannot take another person's measure. The worst person in your life could be the one that is an enlightened being manifesting. The best person in your life, the kindest person, the sweetest person, could just be a regular person who's a nice, good person. We don't know. We don't know. Now, it's not to say that the Buddha is going to manifest in, you know, horrible, evil ways because we need some sort of lesson. The Buddha is not like sending us lessons so literally. And this is kind of like one new agey way of thinking that lots of people have. Oh, this is a lesson being sent to me. Yeah, it's like, it's a lesson if you decided it is. It's a lesson if you make it a lesson. Yeah, you're in charge of whether that taught you something or not. Yeah, and that can really be more empowering. So feel that the Buddhas are supporting you, they want to benefit you, they love you unconditionally, but what they really want is for you to train your mind out of ignorance and out of suffering. They want you to train your mind. So they're going to offer tools for you to heal yourself. They're going to offer tools for you to train yourself. They're not going to kind of like be sitting in a committee in the grand Dharmakaya mind of all the Buddhas saying, you know, like, what does Susie need today? Let's send her a dark storm cloud, you know, and then she'll say, oh, this is my lesson for today. It's a lesson if you want it to be a lesson, if you have the mental space to make it so. So do you feel there's like a subtle nuance there? Like they are benefiting you, they are helping with conditions, they do want you to be happy, but they're not like plotting in this kind of, I guess, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but you know what I mean by these new agey folks who say, hey, this is a lesson, everything's a teaching, you are my teacher, as if it was all meant just for them. It's like, it's not quite so simple as that. There's a million conditions in our life. Some of those conditions have been orchestrated by the Buddhas. Some of those conditions are just the playing out of our own karma. And which one is which is hard for us to know. And it's nice for us to just decide, let it all be a teaching, whether it was meant to be or not. Yeah, whether it was meant to as that or not. Does it make sense? Yeah, so this Nirmanakaya, we need to benefit sentient beings, but you know, you can be developing on the basis of mind training your own negative karma ripening just as much as the Buddha is sitting in front of you teaching, just as much as your cat pretending to be a cat when actually is a Buddha and you feed them. What is actually teaching you? It can be a lot more nuanced. Yeah, Susie, did you have something?
I'm not quite sure I can articulate this. I'll have a go. When do you have to pray to the Buddhas for them to help a person or a situation? If you answered this just now, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get my head around it. Do you, or can they just get involved anyway? I mean, obviously they can do anything.
The prayer is like an invitation. So imagine the Buddhas are benefiting you, trying to benefit you all the time. But as soon as you pray, you're receptive to the help that is already coming. It makes you able to access it and feel it and meet it. It's like they're reaching out hands and you reached back. Make it really simple. Like you're a mom, right? Like, can your kids always feel the fact that you love them, even though you love them all the time?
I'm sure they're irritated by me sometimes,
right?
Yeah.
right,
and think
like,
that I'm a dragon, yeah,
right. Like, so I mean, imagine that the Buddhas are a bit like that, where despite the fact that they love you, doesn't mean you always feel that. Just like there are people that we love and we really care for, and we would do anything for them, and there's so many things that we would do to benefit them, but they still might feel all alone, misunderstood, and unloved. Right? They might feel that way, even though that's not true. But as soon as they say, hey, could you help me with this? We're like, yay, I can help you with this. Yeah, the Buddhas are the same, but in this giant cosmic way, you know, where they just are flooding us with love, flooding us with compassion, complete acceptance. Because of their omniscience, they know exactly why we're in the mess that we're in. And they're so nice about it. They're just like, of course you are, poor darling. Anyone else with your series of lifetimes would wind up in that mess. Of course. Complete love, complete acceptance. Yeah. But we don't feel loved and accepted always. You know, and we can feel so alone, even though on every atom are Buddha's numberless as atoms, each surrounded by an assembly of bodhisattvas. Still, we might be alone in our house, like, you know. So the fact that we don't feel it doesn't mean they aren't there. Just like the fact that we send love to people doesn't mean that they feel it. They have to be open to it. They have to be receptive to it. They have to want it, you know? And in a way, they have to feel worthy of it. There's a lot that goes into feeling the love of someone else. And those factors are very little to do with their love. Their love can just be there. And then we have to get all sorts of things happening with our own psyche to actually feel it and receive it and connect with it. Yeah.
Thank you. That's clear. Thank you.
So prayers are really asking ourselves to open, reaching back at what's reaching towards us already. It's also a way to create merit, mental momentum towards this goal. So if you're saying something like, may all sentient beings have happiness in the causes of happiness, that's not going to make all sentient beings have happiness in the causes of happiness in that moment, but it's creating the aspiration in your mind to be more entrenched, more deeply held, more reinforced, more true for you that you want that. And that creates this inner mental momentum to be able to enact that in your daily life and as a Buddha to come and all of these things. But also by thinking that your heart is open, which means the ordinary love of your friends and family is easier felt, as well as the love of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So just that simple phrase, may all sentient beings have happiness in the causes of happiness. So it's like with prayers, they're not like wishes. They're reminding us of our aspirations, which are possible, which will need us to be a part of. Yeah, so it's like it's not a passive, please save me. It's, I am savable, I need reminding. Who's going to save me? Oh, me. I'm going to save me, but through the tools that you are offering. But those tools aren't copyrighted. Yeah, those tools don't belong to only the Buddhas, right? Like, what is a Buddha? A Buddha is an enlightened being. They don't have to be Buddhist Buddhas, right? They can be any enlightened being called any old thing if they have the qualities and characteristics of a Buddha. So anything that's offering you tools to open your heart and develop your mind, you could call Dharma or medicine or moving you towards your enlightenment. You know, we don't have to be, I guess, sectarian or tight or fundamentalist about these things. It's just in the Buddhist path, there's really specific tools to get there faster. And why reinvent the wheel? But if Buddhism is not something that works for your friends and family, that doesn't mean your friends and family can't eventually get enlightened. They can use whatever they're using and gradually move along the path, and they'll eventually meet teachings to get them all the way there. So part of understanding Buddha nature is almost understanding that there is such a thing as the Great Enlightenment, where eventually all sentient beings will be enlightened. Because it's our nature, it's our potential. Your Buddhahood, your Buddha nature cannot be removed. Your negative states of mind can be. Yeah, you just keep thinking that. You cannot remove your Buddha nature. You can remove your negative states of mind. So if someone is an altruistic atheist, they might be training their mind to get rid of negative states and develop positive states and be moving along the path to enlightenment, even if they don't call it that. And then in some lifetime, they'll meet other tools to help them go further and other tools to help them go further. We could say those tools were offered by Buddhas, but if they don't like those words, don't use those words. You know, and an ethical atheist might actually be winding up being more ethical than a card-carrying Buddhist. You know, it's really about the individual and how they practice, isn't it? So if you're praying, what is prayer really happening in your mind? What is it doing? It's reminding you of what you prioritize. It's reminding you of what you value. And it's reminding you that you can ask support of those who have come before you or who have like finished the path that you're on already, that you're not alone in this, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So these four Buddha bodies, you know, they're interesting technical terms. When you hear the, you know, the teachers and the Geshis say, the kayas, the Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya and the Sambhogakaya and the Nimanakaya, kaya just means body. Yeah, whether it's a wisdom body or a form body, kaya just means bodies. And these bodies are what we need to benefit ourselves and to benefit others. They're the result of the path. Is that part clear? Yeah, these bodies are the result of the path, the method side and the wisdom side. Okay, so we'll have a little break and then we'll do some meditation. So it's what time is it for you guys? You never do the time zones. Like a 20-minute break, does that make sense? Yeah, 20 minutes, okay, great, see you soon. And if you have questions that have popped up, you can type them into the chat and I can look at them at the top. Okay. So are there any questions before we do our meditation? Any thoughts? Is there anything that you've heard about Buddha nature that you've been curious about or confused about from other sources or anything today? Bits to unpack or doubts? Yeah, go ahead.
The thing that is fuzzy for me are the kayas. And I just think I need to spend more time with it. That is confusing for me.
Yeah, just what is that like exactly, or what is their purpose exactly, or?
All of the above.
Yeah.
And which one is which and how, yeah, I'm just not sure how it all fits in.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, for sure. And start simple with, basis, two truths, path, method, wisdom, the results of that, form bodies and wisdom bodies. Yeah. So basically what you need for yourself is to not suffer and not be full of ignorance. You need that for yourself. So that will be your wisdom body. Yes. And then what you need to benefit others, you need to be able to take some form, some shape, some ability to, get in there. Yeah. So those are for the sake of others. So you can, just kind of keep it simple, and then, the nuance and the subtlety will come over time, but keep it simple to begin with.
Yeah, that really does simplify it.
Great. And I know it's a lot to take in. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Can Buddhas present in, I think I'm correct in this, in inanimate objects?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. And bodhisattvas, even like 10th level bodhisattvas can as well. I think sometimes Rinpoche talks about how, a bodhisattva could even be an airplane. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and then I guess that leads me to think, I don't know which inanimate objects have a mind.
Yeah, you bump over a vase and you're like, sorry.
Yeah. Because then, because a mind possessor, you think of a being.
Mm.
But if a Buddha is in the form of a park bench, for whatever reason, then that could be, there's a mind there.
Well, regardless, the Buddha's mind pervades everywhere. So even if the Buddha has not decided to manifest as a bench, the Buddha's mind is there in the bench. Whether they decided to be bench for you or they're just pervading bench, the Buddha's mind pervades everywhere. Which then I, of course, get the like Santa Claus song, like he sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. I get that like Santa in my hand. But it should be a source of great comfort, but also briefly embarrassment. Right. Oh, sorry about the 90s. Sorry. I don't know. Right.
That's funny.
Definitely. Yeah. So anyway, everywhere. The Buddhas are everywhere, whether they're manifesting specifically and directly as an inanimate object or not is who can say. But certainly they're there. Yeah, certainly they are there. And I think, have you ever had that, I don't know, dark night of the soul kind of a moment where you pull out a book from your bookshelf and you're just like, something, I just need something, and you flip it and it happens to be exactly the right thing to read at exactly the right time. Why that page then? Coincidence, karma, Buddhas, who can say? But, if they can help, they will. The only thing preventing them is our karma, not their care. And when I say our karma, never hear it as fate. Yeah, not fate, just obscuration. Yeah. So we're going to do kind of an interesting hybrid meditation. We're going to do a meditation on Maitreya's 9 analogies for Buddha nature. And it's really poetic. Maitreya, he kind of describes the way to understand your latent potential and your afflictions in these very visual ways. So some people are good visualizers, just easy come, no problem. Some people cannot visualize for the life of them. So I have made you a visualization aid, but if you do not need it, close your eyes. If you do not need it, close your eyes. So there will be a video on screen. You can look at it some other time too if you're curious, but don't feel overwhelmed by the images. If you're a good visualizer, just keep your eyes shut and bring these images to your mind. And all of them are going to be basically ways for you to feel like, despite your afflictions, you have Buddha nature. Yeah, and that those things that obscure you are not you. Yeah, and so we know this intellectually, we've been talking about it all morning, but now we really want to be in that space to really connect deeply with the impact of that. So it's kind of like, let's move it from head to heart. Let's move it from intelligence to, more artistic expression. Let's get it to integrate, because it fundamentally changes your life to stop identifying with the mess. Yeah, so these are 9 analogies of the concealer and what is concealed from Maitreya's Sublime Continuum is the meditation that we will do next. So just get yourself a nice posture. And again, no need to look at the screen if you can visualize. So you can close your eyes or have them just a little bit open. But before we even start, just take a few moments to be with the breath, allowing surface distractions to settle. Just breath. And if a particular thought catches your attention, just gently disengage it from your attention and come back to the breath. Not suppressing, not chasing, just gently disengage and come back to the breath. And then revive your motivation, thinking to ourselves, through all of these efforts, may we become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness, and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment, hatred, and indifference. And so thinking the first thing that seems to obscure our mind from seeing our Buddha nature is attachment, clinging and grasping, all of the forms of hunger, all the forms of desire, all the things that need to be fed makes it hard for us to see our Buddha nature. And this attachment can be seen as like a wilted lotus, hiding our Buddha nature. That Buddha nature which can become the truth body. And so imagine that the petals of the lotus simply obscure the fact that there is a Buddha image there. And try not to get lost in the petals. This obscuring factor of attachment brings rebirth in the form and formless realms. But once overcome, we can become that Buddha. You can imagine the petals falling back to reveal the Buddha always that was there, the naturally abiding potential. And shift your identity there, away from the petals that are temporary and wilt to what is beneath them, ever present and pure. And the next thing that obscures us is anger. All of the agitation, all of the aggression and hatred, impatience and irritability, like a swarm of bees. So busy, so frenetic, pushing away all the things that annoy us. We can become panicked because we're uncomfortable or in pain. We can rage. And this swarm of bees conceals the ultimate truth of the emptiness of our own mind, its lack of inherent existence. So if we identify as anger, it's like identifying with this swarm of bees. And we miss the fact that underneath is pure, clean honey, sweet and perfect. That our true nature is like this sweet, pure honey, delicious and nourishing. This honey is like the emptiness of inherently existent mind. All the potentiality for growth and change. And the next thing that obscures us is ignorance, confusion, not knowing, as well as knowing incorrectly. It can bring us rebirth in the form and formless realms, the desire realm, the innate ignorance keeping us locked in samsara, the everyday vagueness, cloudiness, like the dust that comes from husks of seeds. All of these husks obscuring the pure grain underneath, confusing and distracting. Our ignorance is like these husks. Our Buddha essence is like the kernels of grain. Why identify with the husk? It's removable. It's surface. Think about the naturally pure Buddha essence, these grains. And the next thing that obscures our mind is manifest afflictions, attachment, animosity, confusion. Not just those latent ones, but the everyday version, the habit of them. It takes so little stress for our mind to go into attachment, into anger, into ignorance. Almost like they're our default setting. And because of that, we don't see our true nature. We don't see the lack of inherently existing mind. We just identify with the filth and miss out on the gold. Even the stickiest mud cannot stay forever. Doesn't obscure the nature of the gold. Cleanable. through purification, through the wisdom realizing emptiness, we can get to that pure gold. Why identify as the three poisons with the mud and the dirt and the filth? They are removable. The gold is not. And the latencies of ignorance, these also obscure our mind. The imprints, also like earth, obscuring a grand, vast treasure, that naturally abiding Buddha essence can become non-abiding nirvana, the nature Dharmakaya. Under the earth is treasure. Under our ignorance and latencies of ignorance, imprints of ignorance, abundant treasure. And we have so many objects of abandonment on the path of seeing. We might realize emptiness directly, but then we need to repeat and repeat and repeat to remove the acquired obscurations of afflictions, as well as those that are there naturally from beginningless time. So particularly these acquired afflictions are like the skin of a seed, but underneath is the sprout, the transforming Buddha essence that can become the wisdom Dharmakaya, the jhana Dharmakaya. The skin of the fruit can burst, revealing a seed and plants. All of these negative habits can be overcome. Qualities can grow and flourish. Like an orchard of fruit, we can develop abundant qualities. We have all sorts of intellectually acquired obscurations, different superstitions and beliefs, but we are not them. And then the objects of abandonment on the path of meditation are those innate ones and their seeds. Those can also be overcome. Like a tattered rag, revealing the presence of a Buddha statue. Just underneath. Once we're on the path of meditation, very few things prevent us from full seeing. Like lifting a veil. Buddha statue right there under the cloth. Imagine lifting that veil, the perfection underneath. And then we have the objects to be abandoned on the 7 impure stages, particularly afflictive obscurations. And because of these afflictive obscurations, it's like we are a child who will become a universal monarch. But because we are born destitute, we don't see it. Because our family is in such poverty, we don't understand our own potential. So we identify with the rubbish heap we were born into, rather than the Buddha we will become. These afflictive obscurations are like this trash heap, but really, we will grow into this Buddha, like the child of a destitute mother. Enlightenment is actually our birthright. We will develop the full enjoyment body of a Buddha. With all of the marks and signs. And the very last things to be abandoned on the 3 pure grounds, the very end of the path of meditation. These cognitive obscurations, they obscure us from seeing our Buddha nature, from developing into it. Like a layer of clay dust obscuring a golden Buddha statue. Before we start to chip away, all we see is the clay. But underneath, perfect Buddha statue, gleaming and golden, despite the dust it came from. By the time we're a bodhisattva on the pure grounds, Buddhahood is so close. Just a few more layers of dust to be overcome. And so now just settle your mind on the image of Shakyamuni Buddha, the most recent full Dharmakaya aspect that showed the entire path to enlightenment. Golden in color, 1 face and 2 arms. 1 hand stretched down, the other in his lap. Looking directly at you with a kind, compassionate gaze, simultaneously holding all sentient beings. He sends out rays of light. Imagine these rays of light touch you and all sentient beings, ripening your own seeds for enlightenment. Imagine these rays of light also purify your body, speech, and mind of all negativities, of all suffering. This light doing the same for all sentient beings. Imagine this light ripening their seeds with compassion and wisdom, purifying their negative karma and obscurations. This light touching all sentient beings in all environments. And as you visualize this light, if it feels comfortable, you can also add the mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha. Jaya Jaya Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Jaya Jaya Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Taya ta 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 Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. Continue the mantra under your breath, together with the visualization. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Tayata. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. And then imagine that the Buddha dissolves into light and absorbs between your two eyebrows, blessing your body, speech, and mind. And think that the Buddha reappears at your heart center, facing the same direction as you. And you send out light in all directions. And all sentient beings become Buddhas. And all environments become pure. And you think by imagining this future, we bring it closer to the present. And all sentient beings who have become Buddhas and all environments that have become pure, absorb back, collecting back towards yourself, absorbing into you. And you think this future is possible for myself and all sentient beings. Becoming enlightened will happen. And we dedicate. Chancho samcho rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyuchi ke panyam pa me pai gone gondu pawasho Tony dawa rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyuchi ke panyam pa me pai gone gondu pawasho. And you can relax your attention. Okay. So all of those analogies, they're talking about different kinds of obscurations, different kinds of afflictions. You'll gradually get your head around these things as time goes by. And after lunch, I'll talk a little bit more about these paths. But do you have any impressions, having kind of thought about those traditional analogies and that kind of old-fashioned poetry? Was it useful in some way, or was it a bit much? What happened?
I just want to say that I love your multimedia presentations. I discovered you a year ago looking for sadhanas, and yours were by far the best. The production value is very good. That's why I like you so much. You're slick and you're getting better, and I just love it. Thank you so much. I like slick.
The pandemic is teaching us all new skills.
It's great. I would like to talk to you about what you use software and stuff, but I'll do that personally. Thank you.
Sure. And, and I want to be sensitive to the fact that some folks just can't visualize, and so might as well have a picture. And then if you can visualize, you just close your eyes. So, look, it can be a lot. These are traditional, these 9 analogies. If you ever study the sublime continuum of Maitreya, which really goes into Buddha nature and all of the marks and signs of a Buddha and all of the qualities and what a Buddha gets up to, he goes into these 9 analogies in some depth. So it's nice to just touch them, even if you never come back to it. I bet there's one in there that resonates. Maybe they all resonate, but just kind of a way of framing. There's the mess, and then there's the fact that it's obscuring something perfect and pure. And that thing that is perfect and pure is not going to lead you. And all of that mess on the top is just agitation and extra and removable. And that is the point of all of it. Did that point settle in some way? Ish. Yeah, slowly. Yeah, any thoughts? I'll pop the, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think especially the gold under the all the layers of mud and the man getting the statue out of the clay, like getting all that, like it's really hard to look at. It was helpful to see it over and over to really have it sink in, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
like that one too. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Look, I'll pop the chart on the screen and just have a look. And when you see it, just kind of check, are there bits that really resonated for you or were confusing to you? We didn't look at this last column because that's kind of a more advanced conversation. What we looked at was these similes for the obscuring factors. So we started with the lotus, which was the seeds of attachment that can bring rebirth in the form and formless realm, and then, manifest attachment being the obvious exaggeration of good qualities and clinging and stuff. And that lotus was obscuring the Buddha image. And what is analogous to is that the Buddha nature can become the truth body. And then we had the bees as the simile, and the obscuring factor being the seeds of anger or the latent seeds of anger. And also, manifest anger itself. I think bees are a very useful analogy about that. And what is obscured is the beautiful, delicious honey, referring to ultimate truth, the emptiness of inherent existence of the mind. And then we had the husk, and the seed, which was representing the seeds of ignorance, which brings rebirth in the form and formless realms. And of course, manifest ignorance, which causes all sorts of trouble, and innate ignorance, which causes all kinds of trouble. But specifically here, we were talking about the seeds. And it obscures the delicious kernel of grain, or the healthy, nutritious kernel of grain, representing the naturally pure Buddha essence. And then there was the filth, which was describing the manifest afflictions of attachment, animosity, and confusion that bring rebirth in the desire realm where we are now. And it obscures gold, representing the emptiness of the mind. So that one particularly, the manifest afflictions of attachment, anger, and ignorance, that means the ones that are in your face, the ones you're dealing with all the time. And this is where our identity can get really trapped, especially if we're stressed out. And that's the theme of the day. The theme of the day becomes one of those afflictions. You're grumpy all day, or you're needy and depressed all day, or you're kind of vague and spacey all day. And that feels like how you are. It feels like that is you. And you either defend that and you're defensive about it, or you feel terrible about it and you look down on yourself and hate yourself for it. But either way, it's like you're giving it a concreteness that it doesn't have. Yeah, and you're giving it a reality above and beyond the fact that it just is something that rolls through because of habit, affliction, karma. It's not you. Yeah, so it's like, let it feel gross and disgusting, just don't identify with it. Let it be a filthy trash heap, but only if you're understanding it's not you, it just came from ignorance. So it's not like you're pretending it's gold. It's not gold, it's covering the gold. Yeah, you're not saying, oh, it's all good. No, it's not all good. That's terrible, but it's not you. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and then it's variations on a theme. Yeah, variations on a theme. Yeah, I'll have a little peek at the rest of them, see if any ideas or questions pop up. So then we had the earth, which is the latencies of ignorance that created unpolluted karma, and unpolluted karma leads to rebirth in these sort of formless concentrations, as Travakas and solitary realizers. So it's like you're not done with your path, but you're not suffering so much, but you're also not being of active benefit to all sentient beings. And that earth obscures the treasure, which can become non-abiding nirvana. And non-abiding nirvana, or the nature Dharmakaya, that's that state beyond sorrow, but it's not enlightenment yet. And then the skin of the fruit, or the skin of the seed, this is talking about acquired afflictions. And these are the objects to be abandoned on the path of seeing. And we'll talk about these paths like the path of seeing after lunch. but basically acquired afflictions were things that you learned and believed in that were totally wrong. Yeah, and you bought into them. So superstitions. We have a lot of superstitions that we don't acknowledge, yeah? We have superstitions like, what? Don't walk under ladders, black cats are, bad luck. Okay, those are not what we're talking about. We're talking about ideas like we must find our authentic self or find our true nature. And the connotation is that there's a core finite something. Yeah, rather than our true nature being its lack of inherent existence and its ability to develop to enlightenment, we think our true nature is some sort of like Oprah Winfrey special authentic self. Yeah. Rather than the real authentic self, which is its lack of inherent existence and its ability to transform. We think there's some sort of like, essential usness to be discovered. And I mean, and like, not to poo-poo Oprah, she has lovely things to say, but, there's something wise in there about we want to be non-deceptive, we want to be honest, we want to live in a way that's got integrity and is not full of, cognitive dissonance. Love all that, yay, Brene Brown, whatever stuff, good stuff. But what we do want to look at is our superstition that might think, I have to find myself. Yeah. You built yourself and then you believed it. Yeah, you built yourself, then you believed it. Yes, and the common analogy that Lama Zopa Rinpoche gives, which I think is so useful, is something like the letter A, where when we were children, before we understood the letter A, it was just lines. Yeah, it was just 3 lines. And then someone introduced us and said, these 3 lines are the letter A. And then it was repeated and repeated and repeated. And now when we see the letter A, it jumps off the page and tells us that it's an A. In fact, we are telling it that it's an A. Yeah, we put A there on those lines, but it feels like it jumped out and told us. That's the feeling, because it's so familiar. Yeah, and the self gets a little bit like that too. Like there's just lines and we're saying A is just naturally there with those lines. Not so. Yeah. And, and you can use really basic stuff to like get you into the groove of these thoughts before it gets subtler and subtler, right? So take a really easy example, like if you've ever traveled, I like this example because it happened within a short period of time. I was in Australia, I had a cold, I went to the pharmacy to get cold medicine, and there was a skin bronzer to make you browner, yeah, and then diet pills to make you thinner, right? Classic, pharmacy situation in Australia. And I was like, oh, poor people that, feel like they need to look tan and thin, and isn't society crazy? And then the next week I went to India and I still had the cold. And so I went to a pharmacy in India and there was lotion to make your skin paler and like protein supplements to make you fatter. Yeah, and I just thought it was like the same week, and the point of both was the same, which is if you do these things, you will be more beautiful and worthy of love, but they were totally the opposite things. And both of them were saying, these are signs that you're rich or whatever too, of course, and all of those societal things, but it helps you realize there's no inherently existent beauty. Because here it's saying browner and thinner, and here it's saying whiter and fatter, and they're both saying these are the things that will make you happy and worthy, and it's all nonsense, but they're totally different things. It's all contextual. Yeah. So if you can think of those kind of absurdities that you've come across in your life, you can break the spell of all the layers of superstitions, those intellectually acquired and those that are innate. Yeah, because the first superstition really is, I am inherently existent. That's the innate one, and we're not. So we have to break the spell. So use, really accessible examples that you've seen in your own life of this absurdity, and then get subtler and subtler and subtler until you get to your, something like your personality traits or your sense of whatever identity feature that's important to you. And this is where it's delicate because we don't want to go too far and negate suffering. But for example, if there's anything about the characteristics you have that has been celebrated or hated, either one, it becomes like a defining characteristic. But if it's not celebrated or hated, it's just like something that's there and you're not so clinging to it. You know, so if someone were to say to me, you know, green eyes mean that you're evil, then I'd be like, oh no, my green eyes. But I wouldn't have even thought of my green eyes until they said that. But now they're hated. It's like an identity feature, and it's something to be humiliated by and protect and wear sunglasses, and it's a whole thing. Yeah, but if no one noticed, it wouldn't matter. You know, it's like gender only matters because we have issues with each other on the basis of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't even talk about it. Or race. But there are sufferings related to gender and race because society has decided these things either are celebrated or these things are hated. And then we build a whole society around those assumptions, and it's problematic. But if those things weren't kind of like highlighted or framed, we wouldn't really care about them. It'd be the same as your eye color. You'd be like, yeah, whatever. It's a thing, but it's not me. It's just a thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of living in this way that you realize things are contextual. That does not negate their existence. It negates their inherent existence. Yeah. So we'll keep coming back to those ideas, but it's just something to sit with. Do you have any thoughts before we take a break for lunch? Yeah, a lot to process. Yeah, it's hard to know if this is really familiar conversation for you guys or really new conversation. So please let me know if it's too fast or too slow. But we'll just take a minute and do a little food blessing for lunch. So if you want to just imagine whatever you're planning to eat next, okay? So take a minute and think about whatever is hanging out in your kitchen. If it's still ingredients, that's okay. If you're gonna order DoorDash, that's okay too. Just imagine what your lunch situation is gonna be like. And then imagine that it becomes oceans of uncontaminated nectar that you then offer to Shakyamuni Buddha, who is inseparable from your teachers and is living at your heart center. So as you feed yourself, you're feeding the Buddha at your heart. Om Ahum, Om Ahum, Om Ahum. Lama Sangye Lama Jade Jin Lama Gedun Te Kungi Je Lama Te La Ma Nam La Shepabu. And we think that we see the food as medicine to make us strong and healthy in order to benefit all sentient beings and to not reinforce our attachment and craving. And then we enjoy it fully. Okay. So see you in an hour. Is that enough time for lunch for everybody? Hour. Okay. See you soon.